Today's session will be about the neuron or the nerve cell, which is the cell constituting the nervous system. But we will start at first by watching a short video to remind you about the different parts of the nervous system within the human body that we have seen in the last session.
The nervous system has two parts. The central nervous system, CNS for short, which includes the brain and the spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, PNS for short. The brain is the control center and the seat of consciousness. It collects information and runs all the functions that are under our conscious control. The spinal cord is connected to the brain. It carries signals from the brain to the peripheral nervous system, efferent nerves, and from the periphery to the brain, afferent nerves. Stimuli arriving from outside are also processed in the spinal cord. Lightning-fast reactions are then sent back, as in the case of reflexes. The peripheral nervous system connects the CNS with the body's organs. The peripheral nervous system is made up of billions of nerve fibers. The sensors of these nerves are located in the organs and at the body's surface. Afferent nerves transmit sensory stimuli to the brain or spinal cord. Efferent nerve fibers then carry signals back from the brain or spinal cord to the organs.
So we will start with activity 3 of chapter 4. It is about the histology of the nervous system. We will be studying the neuron, which is the structural and functional unit of the nervous system. So if we take a nervous tissue and we observe under the microscope, we will be able to see the different cellular components of the nervous system. So we can say that the nervous system is formed of cells, and you can see these special cells, which are the nerve cells. These are the main cells constituting the nervous system, but of course you have different other cells. For example, in here the glia cells, which are these small cells, and they are for support, but our main interest will be in the neurons or the nerve cells. So what is a neuron? A neuron is the basic structural and functional unit of the nervous system, meaning it is responsible for the structure as well as the function of this system. It is a specialized cell. It has a special structure, and of course its function, which is transmitting nerve messages. And in this figure you can see one example of a neuron structure, and of course we are going to study the different parts in later slides. Now if we compare a neuron or a nerve cell to an epithelial cell, for example a cell taken from our skin, so this is an epithelial cell, and we want to compare it to a neuron, you can see that the neuron, similar to the epithelial cell, has all the main structural components, meaning it has the cell membrane, which is the membrane forming the boundary of the cell, and of course you have within the cell the cytoplasm, so the cell is filled with cytoplasm, and within the cytoplasm you have the nucleus. But what's special about the neuron, if you compare these two cells, will be the presence of these nerve fibers, these thread-like structures, which might be short as those ones or long as this one. So these fibers are due to extensions of the cell membrane, which allows the formation of cytoplasmic prolongations, or what we call nerve fibers. So these fibers are characteristics of neurons. Now we are going to inspect these two neurons in the figure below, and we are going to indicate the different parts of the nerve cell, and then we are going to look at the direction of the nerve message along the nerve fibers. So you can see that in these two neurons you have a fiber, for example in here, known as the dendrite, which is also present, but they are numerous in the other neuron. So meaning a neuron have nerve fibers which could be one or many, and they are known as dendrites. Of course, you have this part of the cell known as the cell body containing the nucleus, and you can see in here the cell body containing the nucleus. And also you have another nerve fiber, which is the axon, and also you have this axon in here. So we can say that the different parts of the nerve cell will be dendrite, which could be one or many, cell body containing the nucleus, and an axon. Concerning the direction of the nerve message, you can notice that the nerve message is always transmitted along the dendrite towards the cell body, and then it continues its way along the axon away from the cell body. So the same in here, you have the nerve message transmitted along the dendrite towards the cell body, and then along the axon away from the cell body. So to summarize, we can say that the neurons have three main parts that carry out their functions, which are the dendrite or dendrites, could be one or more, the axon, and these two types of nerve fibers are responsible for the transmission of the nerve message. And of course you have the cell body of a neuron, which contains the nucleus. The dendrite is the nerve fibers which carries the nerve messages towards the cell body, and the axon is the nerve fiber that carries the nerve message away from the cell body. So we can say that the nerve message transmission along a neuron is unidirectional. It is always in that one direction, from the dendrite towards the cell body, and then along the axon away from the cell body. Now, to classify neurons based on their structures, you are going to look at this figure, and you are going to see that you have three different structures known as bipolar, unipolar, and multipolar. And this depends on the number of nerve fibers and where these nerve fibers are attached on the cell body. For example, in the bipolar neuron, you would have two nerve fibers, one dendrite and one axon, and these two nerve fibers are attached from opposite sides of the cell body. So we call it bipolar. It means two poles, two sides. Unipolar, you have the dendrite fused with the axon, forming one nerve fiber, which is attached from only one side or one pole of the cell body. So we say unipolar. Uni means one. And then you have multipolar. Multi, it means many. So you have many dendrites, and of course always one axon, but all these nerve fibers are attached from different poles or different sides of the cell body, and we name them multipolar. So as a practice exercise, you can pause the video and then try to classify these three neurons structurally by filling in this table. So you have three neurons, and you are going to look at their structure and then classify them, and then I will correct your answers. If you want to pause the video, pause it and try to answer. Now if you look at neuron 1, this neuron has 2 nerve fibers from opposite poles. So this is a bipolar neuron. Neuron 2 has many nerve fibers, so many dendrites and one axon, and all these nerve fibers are attached from different sides, so it is multipolar. And the neuron 3, you can see that these fused nerve fibers are attached from one side of the cell body, so we classify it as unipolar. We have classified the neurons according to their structure. Now we are going to classify them based on their functions. So by looking at this figure, you will be able to see that neuron 1 is the neuron transmitting the sensory nerve message from the receptor organ, which has detected the stimulus, to the central nervous system. So the receptor organ can detect the stimulus due to the presence of these endings of neuron 1, which will transmit the sensory nerve message to the nerve center. Within the nerve center, you also have neurons, for example, in this case, neuron 2, and it is within the nerve center where we have integration. After the integration, a motor nerve message, which is the order, will be generated and will be transmitted along the neuron 3 in here till reaching the effector organ, which is in this case the muscle, resulting in the response, which is holding the glass of water to drink. So based on this figure, we can say that the neurons have 3 different functions, which are transmitting sensory nerve messages, or being within the central nervous system for integration, or transmitting motor messages. So in this table, you can fill the different functions of these 3 neurons, but before you pause the video and try to write your answers, I'm going to tell you what would be the names of these neurons based on their function. So this is what we call functional classification. Neuron 1 is the sensory neuron or afferent neuron. Neuron 2 is known as interneuron or association neuron. And you have neuron 3, which is the motor or efferent neuron. So now you can pause the video and write the function of these 3 different types of neurons. To correct your answers, you can see that the sensory neuron transmits sensory nerve messages from the receptor organs to the central nervous system. The interneuron is the association neuron, which relay the sensory neuron to the motor neuron and allows integration of nerve messages. And of course, neuron 3 is the motor neuron or efferent neuron, which is responsible for transmitting motor messages from the central nervous system to the effector organ. Note that the sensory neurons are either unipolar or bipolar in shape. Motor neurons and interneurons are always
So this is a summary.
shape. The sensory or afferent neuron, it detects stimulation. We said that its ending is within the receptor organ, so it can detect the stimulation, and actually the receptor organ can detect stimulation due to the presence of these endings of the sensory neurons within the organ, and then it will transmit the sensory nerve message from the receptor organ to the central nervous system. The motor neurons or efferent neurons transmit motor or efferent messages from the central nervous system to the effector organs, And then you have the interneurons or association neurons, which are found within the central nervous system. They relay the sensory neuron to the motor neuron, and this is what is known as integrative role. So, to elaborate, the correct connection between the sensory neuron and the motor neuron is the work or the job of interneurons. So interneurons ensure communication between sensory and motor neurons in a correct way. So making these right connections is known as integration.